All right, picture the Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. It's a completely harsh, barren wasteland of naked rock. The continents are silent, they're getting blasted by UV radiation, and they are entirely devoid of life. Everything is just trapped in the oceans. Well, in this explainer, we're unpacking what is easily the most dramatic, high-stakes evolutionary story in the history of our planet. We're talking about how a group of aquatic green algae mutated, literally hacked their own biology, and crawled out of the water to survive on dry, unforgiving land. It's an absolute epic tale of survival, and it completely changed the atmosphere of our world.
So I want you to imagine the ultimate survival challenge. You're an aquatic organism, right? You're just floating around in this supportive, nutrient-rich bath, and then suddenly you're stranded on dry rock. The air is actively sucking the moisture out of your cells. Gravity is pulling you flat against the ground. And honestly, the worst part? You don't have any internal plumbing. No veins, no roots to dig down into the soil to grab a drink. How on earth do you survive? To actually survive that nightmare, they needed a massive evolutionary cheat code. And that was the embryophyte. This is the biological classification for all true land plants. You see, when these pioneers made the jump to land, the biggest threat wasn't just staying alive as an adult, it was reproduction. A naked embryo exposed to the open air would dry out and die in minutes. So they came up with a revolutionary strategy. They started forming embryos that were nurtured and physically protected right inside the maternal tissue of the parent plant. They effectively built a biological safe room just to prevent their young from dehydrating. Now, to be fair, they didn't start completely from scratch. These brave plant pioneers actually brought a highly effective ancestral toolkit directly from their green algae ancestors. First up, cell walls made of cellulose. This is a super tough structural carbohydrate that gave them a basic level of armor against the elements. Second, they had chlorophyll A and B, which are basically incredibly efficient solar panels for capturing sunlight for photosynthesis. And third, they had the ability to store energy as starch reserves right inside their plastids. So they were pre-equipped with the perfect survival gear, they just had to figure out how to use it out of the water. Check out how this lineage actually maps out. It's like a giant family tree. We start way at the top with a single-celled eukaryotic ancestor. Then we hit the first major evolutionary split with red algae. But if you follow the line down to green algae, these guys are the direct ancestors of our terrestrial pioneers. And finally, boom, we arrive at the embryophytes. They took that ancestral toolkit, combined it with that maternal embryo protection we talked about, and literally changed the world forever.
Section 1. The avascular pioneers. Let's meet the bryophytes.
Okay, so on one side of the plant world, we have tracheophytes. These are vascular plants. Think here ferns, pine trees, rose bushes, things like that. They have complex plumbing systems made of rigid tissues called xylem and phloem to pump water around. On the flip side, we have a term you'll actually spot in Portuguese textbooks, atracheophytas. Translating that on the fly, it simply means avascular plants, plants that entirely lack tracheids. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that bryophytes are atracheophytas. They have zero rigid internal plumbing system, no true veins, absolutely nothing to pull water up from the ground.
And because they lack this structural plumbing to move water around and hold themselves up against gravity, they face a massive, massive physical limitation. A few centimeters. That is it. That's their maximum height. Without rigid cell walls acting like microscopic steel beams, and without pipes to pump water up to a high canopy, they are locked into being incredibly tiny. They are basically forced to live their entire existence just hugging the ground. But hey, do not let their microscopic size fool you for a second. These guys are the ultimate survivors. You might look at them and think they're fragile, but despite lacking roots and plumbing, they are found in the most extreme biomes on Earth. We're talking everywhere from the dripping humidity of tropical rainforests down in Brazil to bone-dry, scorching deserts, and even the freezing, desolate expanses of the Arctic and Antarctic. They act like highly specialized sponges. They just absorb water directly from the atmosphere, from fog, dew, maybe a brief rain. And when times get tough, they can practically shut their systems down and just wait out the dry spells.
Section 2. Anatomy of a rule breaker.
Since bryophytes don't have those specialized vascular tissues we mentioned, they actually can't develop true complex organs. Instead, their entire body is what's called a thallus, or as it's known in Portuguese botanical terms, the talos. It's just a simple, undifferentiated mass of survival tissue. Every single part of the plant can absorb water, every part can photosynthesize. It's a completely decentralized way of living, and it's brilliant. They essentially hacked the system by creating completely fake versions of standard plant anatomy. Step 1. Rhizoids. These are thin, filamentous structures strictly for anchoring to the rock or soil. Step 2. Colloids. It's a central axis acting as a structural core but totally lacking the vascular plumbing inside. And step 3. Phylloids. These are laminar, green, leaf-like structures that handle the photosynthesis. They are the ultimate imposters of the plant world, but honestly, they do the job flawlessly.
Now, beyond the fake organs, they evolved some serious biochemical armor to survive that punishing dry air. First, they've got a cuticle. This is a microscopic, waxy lipid polymer layer that coats the outside of the plant, sealing in moisture and drastically reducing dehydration. But even more insane is how they protect their reproduction. They evolved gametangia. These are multicellular jackets of sterile cells specifically designed to protect their fragile sex cells. The antheridium produces the male gametes, and the archegonium houses the female gamete, and eventually the embryo itself. They essentially built specialized microscopic bunkers for their DNA.
Section 3. The ultimate plot twist. A backwards life cycle. Okay, think about an oak tree for a second. When you look at an oak tree, you're looking at the sporophyte phase of the plant. It's diploid, meaning it has 2 sets of chromosomes, and it's the big, dominant main body. But in bryophytes, the whole thing is completely backwards. The sporophyte is practically a parasite. In mosses, the green leafy part you see covering the rocks is actually the gametophyte. It's the boss, dominant, independent, long-lasting, doing all the photosynthesis. The sporophyte, on the other hand, is this tiny, short-lived structure that grows directly on top of the gametophyte and literally relies entirely on it to survive. So what does this dependent little parasitic sporophyte actually look like? Well, when it's time to reproduce, the moss shoots up this temporary structure. It consists of a seta, which is basically a long stalk designed to push upwards against gravity just to catch the wind. Right at the very top is the capsule, or sporangium. That's the factory where the spores are actually manufactured. And interestingly enough, right there on the capsule, they have stomata. These are tiny pores that regulate gas exchange, which proves that even though these plants are super primitive, they have highly specialized micromechanisms to interact with the atmosphere right before they release their spores and just die off.
Okay, I've got to drop a massive biological Easter egg right here. We've been saying this whole time that they have absolutely no plumbing, but evolution is always experimenting, right? Some mosses actually evolved a primitive, weak, fake plumbing system. They have these tissues called hadrum designed to conduct raw sap and water, and leptum designed to conduct organic sap and sugars. But here's the massive catch. Unlike the true xylem in vascular plants, hadrum completely lacks thick, rigid, lignified cell walls. So sure, it can move water, but it provides absolutely zero structural support. It's an incredible evolutionary flex, though, a biological prototype of the exact plumbing that would eventually allow giant redwood trees to touch the clouds.
Think about it. These were mutated aquatic algae that just washed up on a radioactive rock. They had no roots to drink with, no rigid stems to stand up with, and a reproductive cycle that required microscopic bunkers just to keep their DNA from turning to dust. Yet, they spread across the entire globe, literally terraforming the continents for all the terrestrial life that followed. If these tiny, plumbing-free pioneers could conquer the Earth using nothing but an ancestral toolkit and sheer biological willpower, what's stopping you? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.